Hey Bookends! Welcome to a 10-minute book review. I'm 10. Today's book review is going to be on Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson. And welcome to the first book review of the year. So we like to start off every book review with a star point, as in out of 10 stars. How many stars does this particular book honor? We also like to give it a rating, as in if this was a movie or a TV show, what would it be rated? So star point out of 10 stars, this book garnered a solid 5 stars. It is a middle of the road book. We'll go into why that is. And for a rating, it teeters between, let's say it teeters. It teeters between PG-13 and R, depending on whose perspective you're currently reading at the time. So jumping right on in. The book stars really 2 main protagonists, even though there are technically 5. We have Carrie, who is like a surrogate daughter of the owner of this knitting shop. She's not like adopted by the woman or anything like that. We'll get into more about that. But basically, she spends her childhood going to that shop. It's like a safe place for her. And when she becomes an adult, she gets a job there. The woman who actually owns the shop ends up dying suddenly. And so Carrie, the girl who we're talking about, ends up trying to help keep the shop alive. The owner also has these 4 sons that she has adopted. It's kind of like... So the owner is kind of like a big mama kind of a situation. I think even her nickname has Mama something in it. And she adopts these 4 sons, so she has no biological children. Each one of her children is mixed with something. So black and Asian, black and Spanish, black and white. They're each mixed with something. So aside from 2 that are actual biological brothers, they don't really look anything alike. But yeah, they're brothers. That setup kind of puts me in the mind of, we'll go through that later. This book, apparently this is going to be like a series with each brother getting their own book. The main male protagonist of this book is the brother named Jesse. So I want to say that he's kind of like a ladies' man, but women don't really fall in love with him. They have sex with him. Like that's the kind of energy that he puts off. So it's not really a ladies' man, more of like a player. And when we first see the interaction between him and Carrie, there's this weird sexual tension that really didn't have any place. Like if you're just walking into the book. So the book starts off telling about how Carrie was always around the shop owner and her sons, and how like her and Jesse used to have fights and stuff. They had kind of a rivalry. They didn't hate each other, but they had kind of a rivalry. And when they meet for the first time, not for the first time ever, I'm sorry, my cat just did something, not for the first time ever, but when they meet for the first time in the book, there's this weird sexual tension that makes no sense, because it never once indicated that either of them had any form of interest in the other, aside from this like street cousin type vibe. So that was kind of weird. It's not romantic tension, it's more so a mild sexual tension. I don't get it. But yes, moving forward, basically the book is a story of how Carrie is trying to juggle saving the knitting shop, like keeping the legacy alive, while also navigating her budding love for Jesse. So still kind of a rivalry. I cannot talk. Once again, I am going through chronic fatigue. I am trying to muster up a lot of energy. I have a throbbing headache. But we're getting this done. We're getting this done. So they still have their issues, but she's going to navigate her feelings for him that have suddenly popped up or have always been there to some degree, but that she's now acknowledging. Jesse is trying to navigate life without his mother, trying to still be hard, trying to keep up this persona of who it is he wants people to believe he is, and also try to navigate this newfound romance with Carrie. Carrie. I can talk, I really can, just not today. So what brought this book down? First, if we're stripping away anything that makes this book unique, like the unique identifiers, like the locale and the implements that are used to move the plot along, the plot devices, if we take those things out of it, this book is really just a mashup of two movies, which would be Four Brothers and Love and Basketball. So with Love and Basketball, it's kind of like that, not in the way of quality, but in the way of implementation. So these two people don't just all of a sudden fall in love and have sex. They don't just have, it's not like a Love Jones, where these two people just meet and they get intimate and all of a sudden they're in love. No, these two people had a relationship, a friendly relationship, not a sexual or romantic relationship, but a friendly relationship from the age of childhood up into adulthood. So there is some history there to be built upon, just like in Love and Basketball, and there was kind of a tumultuous childhood together, you know, like just, you know, childhood battles, not real battles together. So there's that to build upon. So that in that way it's kind of like Love and Basketball, and it's like Four Brothers because we have these four foster boys who grew up into these four foster men who are being taken care of by this one centralized woman. Now, I believe in Four Brothers, the woman was white. I think her name was Flanagan or something, I'm not sure, but I believe she was white, and in this book, the mother is black. But really, once again, that's one of the finite details within the book that changed from the movie. So if you are familiar with Four Brothers and Love and Basketball, then this, you already know the premise of this book. Aside from there isn't the violence that you see in Four Brothers. So the woman wasn't like murdered, you know. So the premise wasn't new, is what I'm saying. And I was expecting something a little more organic, not something that took from other leads and created something else. Also, too, I wasn't expecting this romance to recreate the wheel, or reinvent the wheel, I should say. But I was hoping for it to at least reinvigorate the wheel, give me something good to look at. This book followed the same classic Harlequin novel trope of the good girl with the bad guy, and she's gonna make him better and he's going to become better for her, and the same timeline of they kind of argue, they find common ground, they fall in love, something happens, the dude does something horrible, they break up, and then they get back together. So it's that same kind of Harlequinish trope where if you've read one, you've read them all. The only thing that changes is the locale and the names. And that is it. So there was nothing really original in the actual implementation of the romance itself, like the actual romantic portion of it. Also, too, when it comes to the voice of the book, there is the narrator. So basically, as the reader, it's like you're watching what's happening to these people through the narrator. It's not like a friend is telling you, and so so-and-so did this, and so so-and-so did that. And it's also not like the actual character is speaking to you, saying, I did this, or I did that. So with that kind of a voice, the pacing and language did not make sense. I said that because when you're reading Carrie's portion, so this is broken up in perspectives. So you have Carrie, then you have Jesse, then you have Carrie, then you have Jesse. So it's broken up into perspectives. And when you're reading things from Carrie's perspective, there's minimal to no cursing at all, because she's the good girl. But then when you're reading things from Jesse's perspective, there is riddled with cursing. It makes no sense. I can understand if it was saying something like, okay, so instead of saying something like, because, you know, if he cursed, that would make sense, because that's just how he talks, I guess. But, okay, instead of saying, I don't give an F, or what the H, or something like that. Instead, it's the narrator saying he didn't give a F. It didn't make any sense, because if this is third person omnipotent, then the third person omnipotent does not have any feelings in regards to what's happening. It's just a narration of what's going on. It's not the actual person themselves narrating it, so it would make no sense for so much inflection to be put in to something that they're out of. It doesn't make any sense. Carrie's portion was written well, but for his portion, for Jess's portion, it just seems like the narrator had too much personalized emotion, not for Jesse, but for the narrator. It would have made more sense, honestly, for Jesse's part if it had been written in first person. Being written in the way that it is, there's a disconnect that makes you wonder, okay, well, why is it his half is written this way and her half is written this way if the same voice is telling both stories? It didn't make any sense. Yeah, so that's why it did not rate that high. It was not the worst book that I've ever read. It is definitely far from the worst book that I ever read. It just did not reach the standard that I believed that it would. In the way of romantic scenes and things of that nature, there are some in the book. It's not a lot, at least not in my opinion. They are easily skippable if you are like me and you are not into romance. Well, I'm into romance, but I'm not into romance scenes. If you're catching my drift, I'm not also into sex scenes. So if those are things that you're not into, the scenes are easily skipped. The telltale signs for them are given. You don't just like fall into a scene. Like in some urban romances where you just kind of turn a page and all of a sudden two people are in bed doing stuff. It's like, wait, what happened? Who are these people? Like, there are cues. In all honesty, there are points in the book where I felt like I was reading two different books. At one point I thought I was reading a Harlequin novel, and then I go over to Jess's side and it feels like I'm reading an urban fiction, and it's like, it feels like two different books. It doesn't feel jointed. I think this is the first book in that particular series. I don't think this is the author's first book, but I believe this is the first book in the series. So I'm hoping that if she does continue the series on, that she gels the voice in it a little bit better. Either putting it in first person for both characters, or keeping the third person out of the emotions of the characters. Yeah. So yeah, it was not the worst book, just was not the best. I wouldn't recommend against it. I just wouldn't recommend, like, if someone asked me for a romance novel or for fiction starring black people, this wouldn't be what I would jump to, just because it didn't really do that much for me. But I also wouldn't boycott the book either. There's nothing particularly wrong with the book at all. And if someone said they were reading it, I'd be like, oh, okay, good for you. Yeah. So this has been a book review for Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Bye, Bookends.